there was a previous epoch of some kind. Maybe something was going on before the Big Bang. And there's been speculation about what sort of a thing that would be. It is, of course, just that speculation. There's no solid proof for some of these ideas. Andre Linde, a physicist now at Stanford, suggested something called eternal inflation or chaotic inflation. Some of you may know in the 1980s a sort of a refined version of the Big Bang theory was put forward by Alan Guth and others, called the inflation model. It says the universe sort of ballooned up in the first tiny fraction of a second after the moment of the Big Bang. Well, what Andre Linde and now a few other people have suggested, is that, okay, so let's say we're in this universe here. So each one of these bubbles is a universe, and you think, all right, here was our Big Bang. But no, that wasn't the beginning, because look, there was a previous universe to that. And after our universe, there's going to be this other universe over here, and they're just branching around all over the place. So maybe there's a whole bunch of universes, and whether there's some ultimate Big Bang that started it all, well, who knows? And so this is hotly debated, but of course, really, there isn't quite enough evidence just yet to answer questions like that. Same goes for a more recent model. I know you can't read the small letters, but don't worry about it. These ideas of brain world cosmologies. That's brain with an A. It comes from membrane, which comes from M theory. And again, those of you who have enjoyed Brian Greene's three-part Nova series or read his books and so on, or maybe the more recent book by Paul Steinhardt himself, know about this idea of the cyclic model in which you think of all the dimensions of our universe being embedded in some kind of higher dimensional structure. So these, what look like just sort of sheets of paper wafting back and forth here, are actually entire universes. We might be living on one of them, one of these brains. But I guess gravity leaks out, if I understand it correctly, and could attract, each brain to the next brain over. And when they smash together, a lot of energy is given off. And if you're living on one of these brains, well, you would interpret that smashing, that release of energy, as having been your Big Bang. But just like in Andre Linde's theory, it suggests that the Big Bang isn't really what we thought it was. It suggests a bigger, deeper, more subtle, larger universe. But again, we don't quite have proof of this yet. Steinhardt's collaborator, Neil Turek, and there were others too, but Neil Turek, you may have read in the newspaper, he is now the director of the Perimeter Institute here in Waterloo. Well, so these ideas are speculative. When I had a chance to ask Alan Guth about this, who was one of the people behind the original inflation model, he said, I think it's clearly an oversimplification to view the Big Bang as the beginning of time. So we shall see. There are two more fun topics to get through, and it's time now to talk about time travel and DeLoreans and that sort of thing, because, well, what's more fun than that? Nothing's more fun than that. And really, it's not just, is time travel possible, but if it is, what about those pesky paradoxes killing your grandfather and all that? Because that's really where things get interesting. And it's interesting that, fiction really led the way here. It's been 100 and a bit years since H.G. Wells wrote his great novel, The Time Machine. And what the narrative technique, or really the foundation of that book, as most of you know, is that he sort of treats time as a dimension, as something that you could travel through. And it might be interesting to ask, how come nobody wrote, there were things that were a little bit like that. Mark Twain had Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court. There were things that sort of hinted at that. But nobody really wrote a time travel book until 1895 and H.G. Wells. Why is that? I don't really have the answer, but apparently, one might guess, people didn't think of points in time as destinations. Maybe they didn't consider past and future to be real. I don't know. These are just guesses. But it's interesting that not too much is seen on that front until 1895, and then it blossoms after H.G. Wells. The way Wells treats it is a bit funny, because the machine is, it's this fanciful, well, if you've seen the movie adaptations or whatever, you know what we're talking about. H.G. Wells imagines this kind of contraption, let's call it, and you get into it and you move through time, and when he's in it, he sees the outside world as having speeded up, so the maid, who would be sort of slowly mopping across the kitchen floor, is now sort of rocketing across, as he turns the knob. Well, okay, that's interesting. So right away, but nothing is happening to his own body, so there's some distinction between your sort of internal time or time within your contraption versus the outside time, well, all right. I mean, there's no explanation for how that would really work. But also, you know, the Earth is moving along in its orbit and stuff, so I guess you have to hope that the time machine sort of clings to the Earth and, you know, that you don't accidentally materialize in outer space. But sure enough, as is evidenced by the maid going across the kitchen, that you are sticking to the Earth's surface, although why that would be, I don't know. But much later, you know, other authors take a more sophisticated look, and when Carl Sagan got around to writing Contact, in, was it the 80s, I think? He went and consulted with Kip Thorne, who was a well-known physicist at Caltech, and Thorne had studied wormholes, which are, you know, this alleged possible sort of, you know, connection between one black hole and another black hole, and it could maybe take you either to another universe, or at least some remote part of our own universe. Well, we don't know if wormholes exist or not. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But if they did, then you could use them in the way that Carl Sagan imagines. Well, I mean, they have to do more than exist. They have to be navigable. There has to be a way of going through them without getting crushed into spaghetti, you know, so there's things like that. But if you could do that, then you'd have something like what Carl Sagan describes in Contact. And if you've seen the movie version, well, there were some changes in it, which I won't, I mean, if you haven't read the book, you might want to. It has a more interesting ending than the movie. In the movie,